Donald Trump. Part 7. De Santis warned. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. In previous parts, in relation to Donald Trump, I've analysed his behaviours and explained why he is a narcissist. He's an obvious one and is categorised, as per my system, as upper lesser type B. This denotes the fact that an upper lesser is usually successful at a local level, but sometimes it can include national and international level, which Trump is clearly the case, being a billionaire and having been the former president of the United States. His lesser status is as a consequence of the fact that he doesn't operate with a facade. What you see is what you get. And he's B because he's bullying, belligerent. He's brash and boastful. It's his way or the highway. He's right, you're wrong. This doesn't mean that he's necessarily an individual that would be given to physical violence, but some upper lesser type Bs aren't. Moreover, it's a case of he causes it as he sees it. That, of course, lends certain distinct advantages in certain situations and draws admiration for being plain speaking. Of course, there are others who can't stand that, the fact that he doesn't sugarcoat anything, that he shoots from the lip, and of course makes him a divisive figure. Liked, indeed loved by many, and loathed by others. But this isn't a debate about whether Trump is likeable or not. You can make your own minds up about that. This, of course, is a channel about narcissism. And his narcissism has served him well. It's propelled him to obtain considerable wealth, fame, and, of course, he got to the top of the tree politically. Whatever you might think about him as an individual, whatever you might think about what his presidency was like, good or bad, that isn't the purpose of videos such as these, but it is to utilize him, like many other people, as prominent examples of narcissism in action. In the past, I've demonstrated, for instance, his clash with Joe Biden, a situation of when narcissists collide. And we have another one, because this time there is a clash between Mr. Trump and another narcissist, Ron De Santis. De Santis has had a cakewalk, in effect, as a consequence of his victory as governor of Florida. And as reported in The Telegraph, Donald Trump claims he has dirt on Ron De Santis and warns him not to run in 2024. Former president claims he knows more about the Florida governor than anyone other than perhaps his wife. The bold, brash boasting that we've come to know from Donald Trump. Now, of course, is this accurate? It might be. Somebody with his reach, influence and wealth may well have unearthed plenty of material about Mr. De Santis. And, of course, there's probably quite a lot to dig up by virtue of the fact that Mr. De Santis is a narcissist also, and therefore will have some skeletons in the cupboard. De Santis, however, is a more polished narcissist than that compared to Trump, and comes from a different category altogether. He is amongst the mid-range narcissists, and I'll leave you to speculate based upon the evidence that you see as to where he fits within that framework of lower mid-range, middle range A, middle range B, or upper mid-range. And I will reveal to you in due course where he sits in that framework, but I'll be interested to see what your observations, those of you that are keen observers of my work. Now, we have a clash here. The fact is that De Santis has popularity and significant. As fact, if my memory serves me correctly, that he was trailing previously to a Democrat-run state and then not only turned it around and secured victory, but has done so by getting a double-digit win. Somewhat impressive. This speaks to somebody who knows the system, who knows how to talk to people, who knows how to put forward a particular facade which draws those voters in. This, of course, is a threat to Trump. It's a threat to Trump because, of course, Trump resides part of the time in Florida. But also, of course, that Donald is looking for a tilt at the presidency in 2024. And there are suggestions that De Santis may well throw his hat into the ring as a consequence of being the Republican nominee, and thus would be going toe-to-toe with the Donald. The article by Rosina Saber tells us Donald Trump last night warned Ron De Santis not to run against him in 2024, suggesting he could reveal damaging secrets about the Florida governor. Use of threat to nullify threat to control posed by the potential for him to run. Mr. Trump is preparing to launch his own White House run next Tuesday, and polls show Mr. De Santis would be his strongest challenger for the Republican nomination. Thus, the outcome of those polls demonstrates a threat to the Donald's sense of control. The former president said, "If he, Mr. De Santis, did run, I could tell you things about him that won't be very flattering. I know more about him than anybody, other than perhaps his wife, who's really running his campaign." This, of course, demonstrates the grandiosity of Mr. Trump, the boasting that he engages in, his belligerence at lashing out at this early juncture to try and take his potential opponent at the knees before things have even started. Mr. Trump, 76, made the comments following an election eve rally in which he teased a very big announcement at his home in Palm Beach, Florida, on Tuesday, November 15th. He appeared to fire the starting gun on the 2024 presidential race over the weekend when he publicly nicknamed Mr. De Santis Ron De Sanctimonious. Insult smearing. No. Assertion of control. Mr. Trump played down suggestions of a feud with Mr. De Santis, calling him a fine guy, flattery, as he spoke to the media on his 757 jet nicknamed Trump Force One, grandiosity. "There's not a tiff with me," he said. "I'm way up in the polls," which of course is accurate, but boasting nevertheless, which people hate to say. I don't think I'd have any trouble defeating him. Excessive level of confidence, demonstrating his sense of entitlement. But he urged Mr. De Santis not to run. But of course, if he's so high up in the polls and is going to win anyway, why would he be concerned about him running? Wouldn't he say, I'd welcome Mr. De Santis running against me. I'd welcome the opportunity to flex my credentials against a worthy opponent. It isn't because the Donald is scared of him. The Donald doesn't do scared in that respect, but it's rather that the Donald's narcissism, in order to assert control in that moment, needs him to speak out against Mr. De Santis by saying, "Your presence is a threat. I'm going to issue a threat to cause you to suggest that you back off, and thus I gain control in this moment." Mr. Trump added, "I don't know that he's running. I think if he runs, he could hurt himself very badly. I really believe he could hurt himself badly." The former president also said he did not think Joe Biden would run again in 2024. He said, "I don't think he runs. It is inconceivable." Mr. Trump confirmed that, as a Florida resident, he had voted for his rival Mr. De Santis to be re-elected as the state's governor. As he left a polling station in Florida, Mr. Trump was asked if he had voted for Governor De Santis. He said, "Yes, I did." Mr. Trump used an election eve rally in Ohio to declare he would make a statement on Tuesday, November the 15th at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. It was read as confirmation that he will make a third run for the White House. The choice of November the 15th is 3 days after Mr. Trump's youngest daughter, Tiffany, is due to be married at Mar-a-Lago. The date also coincides with the publication of an insider's account of the Trump administration by Mike Pence, Mr. Trump's former vice president, and is likely to overshadow its release. Nullification of threat to control. Mark Short, a former aide to the vice president, said Mr. Trump's decision to make an announcement on the same day wouldn't be out of character. And as you're well aware from my other work, that overshadowing something else is a common step that a narcissist would take. Mr. Trump, the article continues, would enter the 2024 race with more than $60 million in cash held by his Save America political organization. But once he formally declares, a number of election laws will dictate spending of the war chest. During his 90-minute speech in Ohio, Mr. Trump said he was confident Republicans would take back Congress and return to the White House in 2024, criticizing Joe Biden's performance. Asserting control over Mr. Biden, another narcissist, as you know, and doing so by way of smearing. But much of his time in the spotlight on election eve was dedicated to his familiar complaints about the media, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and the Democrats who twice voted to impeach him from office. Earlier in the speech, Mr. Trump called Ms. Pelosi an animal smearing, the senior Democrat's husband was violently assaulted by an intruder in their home who had been searching for her last month. She impeached me twice for nothing, Mr. Trump said. Of course, where Ms. Pelosi comes up on his radar, she presents a threat to control, and his narcissism is reminded of her actions against him by seeking to impeach him, which of course is a threat to control. And therefore, he must nullify the threat to control posed by her appearance by pointing out that her impeachment was for nothing, which is what he sees it as through his narcissistic perspective. Earlier, Mr. Trump set off a last-minute scramble among the Republican Party's top officials by threatening to announce his bid at the rally in Ohio and upend yesterday's midterm elections, threatened overshadowing. It prompted a frenzied chain of phone calls from rattled senior Republicans who for months have attempted to stop Mr. Trump from overshadowing the elections that will determine control of Congress. The party's leaders feared an election eve declaration would spur higher turnout among Democrats and potentially tip the balance in razor-thin races for the Senate. Mr. Trump was ultimately persuaded that his announcement would be drowned out by the tide of election news. Therefore, assertion of control by agreement. He told supporters in Ohio who had gathered for the state's Republican Senate candidate J.D. Vance, "We want nothing to detract from the importance of the midterms." And there, although it might seem like he was backing down, he wasn't. That there was an alignment of his own interests of being said to say we don't want anything to detract from it. Therefore, he is able to speak in such terms, and at the same time, that prevents the problem that many Republicans feared. Accordingly, at the point that Trump was being interviewed, it was likely that De Santis was going to win, and win big. And therefore that causes De Santis to come up on his radar. It also raises the prospect of him being a rival for the Republican ticket for the presidential tilt in 2024. In that moment, Trump's narcissism needs him to nullify the threat to control posed by that, because he wants to be the candidate and he wants to succeed as president. Therefore, he issues a threat. Whether he would carry that out is largely irrelevant. The point is, it's said at that time to cause people to back down, to allow Trump to assert control, not over De Santis in the future, as many people might think, but rather to achieve it now. Because like all lesser and mid-range narcissists, Trump's narcissism is focused on the control in the now, without due regard for what is going to happen in the next moment. Now, the Guardian newspaper, in an article written before the midterm elections took place, analyses and states that the Trump-De Santis animosity will evolve into open warfare after the midterms. The simmering animosity between Donald Trump and Ron De Santis, the Florida governor, emerging as Trump's most likely challenger for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination, looks set to evolve into open warfare following the midterm elections. At the point this was written, polls showed De Santis comforted a position to win re-election on Tuesday, but political opponents say his focus is locked on the national stage and a White House run. The two Republicans' feud became evident during a rally for Senate candidate Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania on Saturday, when Trump, who was expected to announce his presidential campaign immediately, introduced his new nickname for the rising conservative star, Ron De Santis. It is a tactic that has cowed previous pretenders to Trump's crown as the Republican leader and kingmaker. In the 2016 election cycle, senior Republican hopefuls Little Marco Rubio, Lion Ted Cruz, and low-energy Jeb Bush were derided, then swept aside. Again, Trump labeling them almost in a way with a pet name, albeit not done in a romantic way, but labeling them as such by way of invalidation and belittlement, all designed to threaten their sense of control, if they require it, and to assert his own. There it is, Trump at 71, Ron De Santis at 10%, Trump said in Pennsylvania, as he perused a screen showing what he claimed were approval ratings for the Republican 2024 nomination. Mike Pence at 7. "Oh, Mike's doing better than I thought," Trump added, mocking his former vice president who he has castigated for refusing to endorse the lie that his 2020 defeat by Joe Biden was the result of electoral fraud, as The Guardian reports. Again, the fact that Pence won't do what Trump wants is a threat to his control, which results in him being smeared. With no discernible irony, Trump called Rubio my great friend at a rally for the senator and other Republican candidates in Miami on Sunday, an event at which De Santis was conspicuously absent. Again, that demonstrates Trump compartmentalization. He can talk about little Marco Rubio back in 2016 and then in the next moment, or years later, refer to him as my great friend. Because, like any narcissist, Donald Trump, like De Santis also, can point different ways as and when required, and that can happen moment by moment. Until now, De Santis and Trump have mostly kept each other at arm's length, but clues to their fractured relationship were evident as early as August 2020, when the notorious prickly De Santis, showing he's hypersensitive to threats to control through that reputation, denounced as a phony narrative an assertion he was the then president's yes man in Florida. The governor subsequently criticized Trump's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, saying earlier this year he regretted not speaking out sooner against Trump's call for a nationwide lockdown. It's not actually regret, but that's appearance of false contrition. In response, Trump called De Santis gutless for refusing to reveal if he had been given a COVID booster vaccine. In June, Trump began readying his anti-De Santis rhetoric, telling the New Yorker he would beat his rival in a nomination contest and claiming it was only his endorsement that revived the three-term congressman's faltering campaign for governor in 2017. Character trait acquisition, sense of entitlement, stealing the credit of others. Now, with the distraction of the midterms almost out of the way, and with Trump seeking a clear run for his third presidential run as a Republican, De Santis too has been granted a derogatory nickname. De Santis' apparent focus on 2024, notwithstanding reports he has told donors he may wait until 2028, when Trump will be out of the way, became an issue during the governor's debate in Florida last month. Charlie Crist, the Democratic nominee, repeatedly challenged De Santis to say if he would commit to a full 4-year term if re-elected. Seizing on De Santis' refusal to answer, denial, assertion of control by nullifying the threat to control by not being drawn to answer, Crist said it's not a tough question, it's a fair question, he won't tell you. De Santis described Crist, a Republican Florida governor turned Democratic congressman, a worn-out old donkey, smearing he was looking to put out to pasture. At the Miami rally on Sunday, Trump declined to criticize De Santis again, but only offered tepid support for him in Tuesday's elections compared to his comments about Rubio and other Republicans in congressional and state races. You're going to re-elect the great friend of mine, Marco Rubio, to the United States Senate. Compartmentalization, hypocrisy, flattery. And you're going to re-elect Ron De Santis as your governor, Trump said. Despite Trump's attacks, De Santis remains in a strong position, winning straw polls of grassroots supporters and becoming ever more visible on the national stage. According to Politico, he also has the backing for any presidential run of the Republican mega-donor Ken Griffin, who donated more than $60 million to the party's candidates during the midterms. I don't know what he's going to do. It's a huge personal decision, Griffin said. He has a tremendous record as governor of Florida, and our country will be well served by him as president. Now, of course, it'll be interesting to see the two of them, in effect, trading metaphorical blows, as we have an ongoing clash of narcissists, both potentially after the same prize. What do people's observations in the Telegraph tell us? Well, Philip Livingston comments, bad night for Trump's election, denying endorsees. And the fact, of course, that many of the people that he backed have not succeeded will reflect on him because, of course, they're an extension of him. Roderick Spode, Trump is finished. Stick a fork in his puffy orange skin, he's done. What a loser. I wouldn't say that he is finished by any stretch of the imagination. Margaret de Rohan, threatening Ron De Santis would be the biggest mistake Trump ever could make. Trump certainly won't see it that way. Becky Akel, I don't think Trump is doing himself any favours by going after De Santis. It's so obviously just petty jealousy. Well, actually, it's not a case of petty jealousy, but rather, of course, it's his narcissism driving him to nullify the threat to control posed by De Santis. It's not a case of going after him. It's necessary to derail De Santis because he's a direct threat to Trump's presidential ambitions. Simon Young writes, trolls dislike Trump and Boris because they're envious of dominant alpha males. Well, a better description would be that they are envious of particularly successful, though you may argue about the term successful, but they are, as they were Prime Minister and President, that they're successful narcissists. And therefore, we have an interesting situation being set up with the Donald, prominent as always, his narcissism in full effect, and of course, the clash that will occur with another narcissist, Ron De Santis. Undoubtedly, we'll be revisiting this as time elapses. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.